Hello students, my name is Moon and this is Basic Science Concepts for all of my students who are taking a health science class. The purpose of this lecture and this video was to address some of the holes in students' understandings of science that I've noticed when I'm teaching my introductory level health science classes. There are some understandings that I assumed all of you had coming out of high school, but it turns out that maybe you don't because of the high variability of your high school education. Well, you need to know these things because they're going to create a foundation on which I teach the other things that you need to learn in those classes. But then I was finding that I had to pause and go into tangents at many times throughout my lectures in order to explain such basic ideas. And so I decided to put it all in one place, just get it over and done, and do it in the beginning of the semester every time. This also covers some of my pet peeves that have been annoying me as I watch the conversations among the general public out in the internet space. So this is going to be a bit of a involved and long lecture. It's going to feel like a slog to you. It's some boring old guy talking about boring old things. So I advise that you get yourself a snack and a drink and get yourself comfortable, and feel free to pause often and tackle this lecture at several times throughout the week. There will be a quiz on this, and I will post it, and you will see it posted. So take notes. And besides, not only do you need this information for this class, whatever class you're taking with me, but this information will really help you cut through a lot of the BS that's out there when people try to claim that they're being scientific, air quotes, scientific on the internet, and then you can see that actually they're not. As you listen to other people talk about science articles, and then eventually you're going to run into a bunch of reports or one person complaining, like one article says one thing and another article says another thing, and then that influencer or you start making statements like, why can't scientists make up their minds? And for example, several years ago, there were some studies, and these are legit studies, that found that the moderate drinking of alcohol was okay, whether it improved cardiac health or survivability or length of lifespan or something this or that. And then a few years later, there were articles that came out and said, actually, no, it's not. Well, so now you have two groups of amateur narrators saying, one says you should drink alcohol because it's good for you, another group of people saying you should not drink alcohol, and they're both claiming science. So each one is saying, I'm right, you're wrong, and if you don't agree with me, you're stupid. And you as the observer is seeing these two groups argue amongst each other, and you ask yourself, if they're both claiming science and they're both insisting they are true, and they're both showing scientific articles supporting their beliefs, then what's wrong with science? Why can't scientists make up their mind? The American Heart Association and National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institutes do not recommend that you start drinking alcohol just to prevent heart disease. So if you don't like alcohol, then don't force yourself to drink it. If you are in the habit of not drinking alcohol, don't pick it up thinking it's going to extend your life. Meanwhile, those of you who do drink alcohol too much, then you really should cut down, because it really does harm your body, not just your liver, but a lot of other things, and it does shorten lifespan. So that's for the record. But that doesn't address what's going on here. That why does science say one thing once and then a little bit later says another thing? Isn't science about the truth, like air quotes, the capital T, capital H, capital E, the truth? And if that's the case, then how can two scientific articles disagree or even contradict each other? And that's what I'm going to try to address here, or one of the things I'll try to address about in this lecture. Okay, there's another thing I want to address, which is the definition of an expert. Sometimes the word expert is used in the positive, like a social media influencer says, I'm an expert, therefore you should believe me. Or it's used in the negative, where a social media influencer says, oh, well, I'm not an expert, that's why you should believe me. It's sort of like a backhanded slap or backhanded compliment or like that. What makes you an expert? If you read an article, does that make you an expert? There are a lot of people on the internet who act that way. They say they don't claim to use, or they don't use the E word up front, but they will say, they will give you a piece of advice and sound very, very confident about it, and then to justify their opinion, they say, I read an article that said. Whenever somebody says, I read an article, or I heard about an article, my thought, I'm too polite to say it, but my thought is, well, then you haven't read enough. You just read one? Oh, that's cute. You read a few? Oh, that's nice. But if you haven't read enough, because what that means is that you don't have all the information available. Not to say that all the information available is enough in itself, but you don't even have that. You just have one point of view, and that's what a science article does. It provides one point of view. What you need is context. The article has to be in context. For example, name anything that you really are good at because you spent a lot of years doing, whether it's work or a hobby or your profession in general, something that you've had years and years of training, education, and real world experience, like you've done it for real. You got paid for it even, although sometimes you can do it as a volunteer status, like volunteer firefighter. Charity organizations are a lot of volunteer work. So you can, whatever it is where you've done it in the real world for years and years and years. And then any topic, any skill. And then one day this new person shows up and says, I read a book about your job and now I know everything I need to know. Move out of the way, I'll show you how it's done. What are your thoughts? Your thoughts is going to be something like, honey, you sweet summer child, you have no idea what you're getting into, because you have the years of experience, of real world experience. You know what it's really like out there, and that's not talked about in any book. So when somebody says, I read an article that said, and then talking to me about something that I know, I believe I know a fair bit about, and this person is like making these conclusions that I know are just plain wrong, or wrong based upon the current information today, and I'm thinking, you haven't read enough articles, you haven't had enough training, you haven't been out there doing it for real. I have what's called context, and before I start sounding too high on myself, if I were to go to a established full professor, PhD professor, and I try to put on airs, that wise sage person will look at me in the same way. Like they're going to say, you've been teaching this for a decade and you've been working at it in some way around here for a while. Oh, isn't that cute? But from their point of view, I don't have the context of their decades of experience to really know what I'm talking about. So it keeps going at it like that. So then, if one article or a few articles don't really justify calling yourself an expert, how many should you read? And my answer is all of them. Every article that's out there. If you want to be a specialist, if you want to claim that you know everything that needs to be known about vaccines, then you need to read all the articles on vaccines, not just your favorite ones, not just the ones shared to you by your favorite social media influencer, or recommended by your favorite podcasts, by various politicians who are making the news today. You don't need to read just those. You need to read all of them, because among all of them there will be many articles that support your point of view and many articles that contradict your point of view, some of them outright proving you wrong. How are you supposed to know these articles exist? Because you have to read them. And then what if you run into one that contradicts your point of view? What if you just say, you know what, that was made by somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, so I'm going to ignore that article. That's not how you build context. So reading all articles about a topic, who has time to do that? Do you have time to do that? You have a full-time job. You have a real life with real-world problems. You're trying to learn stuff here at the college. Who has any time to read all the articles out there, or even make sense of the techno gobbledygook that's out there at the highest levels of science? Well, the experts do. In fact, it's their job. In fact, that's what their paid job is. 8 hours a day, or usually, that's just on the record, but they spend more than that. They spend their lives reading all the articles out there so that they can become the expert. So when somebody says, well, I'm no expert, but I know that, blah, 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 and I'm thinking, I won't say it out of politeness, but I'm thinking, oh, what makes you so confident in your opinion? The fact that you are not an expert, how does that qualify you as an expert if you say you're not an expert?
So what do I mean by context? Let me give you a little history lesson here. Before the internet, the knowledge of the world, or especially medical and science knowledge, was concentrated in in small areas. They were just not generally available. Now in the internet, I understand that everything is at your fingertips whenever you want, or you think that's the way. But back in the old days, detailed scientific information, medical information, was pretty much only accessible if you were in a university or a research center or your public library. Those who really needed to know, because it was a matter of work, it was a matter of finances, it was a matter of life and death when it came to health matters, then people were motivated to go down to the public library. Now, in the public library, they didn't have medical textbooks, not that I remember, and not in my small local public library. Maybe if you went to the New York City Public Library or something like that, 2 volumes of internal medicine, and maybe they had the latest editions of the Journal of the American Medical Association, but those were really dry reading. I mean, you really had to have a wealth of background knowledge to even get past the first page. So not only is this information physically hard to get at, but understanding that information was also prohibitive, because you needed to have years, if not decades, of formal classical training and education. You pretty much had to go in and out of medical school to know what you're reading. So who had that kind of time? The experts did, and they devoted their lives to this knowledge. So for the average person who had a question about their disease or their symptoms, what could they do? They didn't have the internet. They could do what you do, which is ask your friends and neighbors, but what do they know, right? They had their favorite theories. But anyway, if you really wanted to know the answer from somebody who knew what they were talking about, you had to search out these experts. Now with medical information, of course, then people pretty much just waited until they got to their doctor. Back then, knowledge was concentrated or funneled through these experts, which were few and far between. Now, you may say that sounds horrible, because what if you couldn't trust the expert? Because after all, they're human too. They may have conflicts of interest, they are fallible, maybe they don't know as much as they claim to, because they are Maybe they didn't study so hard in medical school as you hope they did. Maybe they only studied as hard as you are doing now. They also procrastinated. They also waited until the day before the exam and crammed and then passed the exam, which is a horrible way to learn things. And then they passed the exam and then got a medical degree, and now they're taking care of you. Think about that for a moment. Anyway, these are fallible humans. Maybe they don't know what they're supposed to know, and maybe everything they're supposed to know wasn't completely true. And I'll talk about the quality of medical knowledge these days later. But then you're used to thinking along those lines because you are a product of this generation society as we know it today. Back then, the doctor knew best, and that was a phrase, doctor knows best, which is basically, this was like 50 years ago, and they would say doctor knows best means like shut up, do what you're told. Those days are long gone, but those days long ago, that's how it went. So if the doctor told you such and such a thing, then that was pretty much all you had. You could ask for a second opinion, and you've always had the right to a second opinion. And people who, the wise ones or the street smart ones, all of course went and got one. That was a little bit extra money because second opinions were not covered usually in standard medical insurance, so you had to pay out of pocket. But if it was like before you went off and got a $5,000 procedure, paying a couple $100 for a second opinion is always a good idea. Anyway, that's the downside of having a few people in control of crucial information. The upside, there is one upside, which is these guys. Can you see my mouse? These guys, these con artists, the advertisers, the people who are trying to manipulate society to make a few bucks off of selling things to people that they don't really need. And these products could be legit, like actually useful, or it could be down and out BS and smoke and fakery in order to get them into a patient so that they can get their commission, they can get their profits. They had to go through the doctor, and then the doctor would carefully evaluate whether these claims were true or not. The doctor acted like a filter, acted like a first line of defense against all these con artists who were trying to get harmful medical ideas onto you. Because they had the context, they had the experience, they had the education to at least tell if what this salesperson is saying was true or not. If it was a legit scientific plausibility, or if it was down and out BS or just noise. And then this whole world of information was then funneled to the patient, and the doctor said, in my opinion, you should do XYZ, you should not do ABC. And then the patient pretty much had no choice but to agree or disagree, and that's pretty much it. Okay, those were the old days. And now current times, right? The world we live in today. So the plus side of the internet, as people like to think, is that we've cut this choke point of information out, and we now have access to all this information here literally at our fingertips. We don't have to drag our shoes down to the library. We can just sit there and browse and browse and browse, and we call that doing our own research, in air quotes. So do your own research in air quotes. So the world is a better place now, right? Everything is solved, right? You don't have to rely on experts. All the answers are easily available to you. Now you can make a decision. You know what? You can even do surgery on yourself. You don't need a hospital after all. Well, actually you do. Because what's happened is by removing this filter from your view of the world, you are now completely exposed to all of the shenanigans that are out there. All the advertisers, all of the conspiracy theorists, all of the con artists, all of the quackery out there. There's nobody filtering this information now. You are now in charge of deciding whether what you're hearing is high quality information or it's noise or it's just outright BS. It's you now. You are the decision maker, not this guy. Which creates this situation where you say you do your own research, but then when you go Google for something, or Bing, or whatever your favorite browser is or search engine is, and all you're doing is pretty much reading one clickbait after another. People know that that average ordinary people are now searching for their medical answers, and they have no previous science or medical background, and all these consumers are doing is jumping from one claim to another. They are easily manipulated by emotional stories. These folks here would say, let me tell you a story about this puppy. It's a cute puppy, it's a tragic story, and then people listen to the story and say, oh, that's horrible, oh, that's so cute, and then they make their financial decisions now, and then they make their medical decisions. So that's what's going on. The question now then is, what do you want? What kind of reality do you want now? Do you want to see the real world as it is? Or do you want to have all of that medical scientific jargon, all of those detailed research reports filtered and interpreted for you? And I purposely drew this to refer to that choice, that famous choice that this protagonist in this movie was making. And before you jump forward and say, I know, I'm going to choose this side because I want to see the real world as it is. Give me everything, warts and all, the good and the bad. Don't fake it for me. Don't pretend. I want to see it without any filters. Okay, if that's what you want, but then you have to then live in this world. If you want no filters, if you want no interpreters, then you got to do the filtering, you got to do the interpreting. You are now completely and wide open exposed to every con artist, every snake oil salesman out there who is going to fog you over with jargon and technobabble that you have no time to cut through. The average person does not have the education, the background, the experience to cut through this technobabble, the advertising. The advertising, all it does is it tells you what they want you to hear, and they conveniently leave out the things they don't want you to hear. That's what advertising is, and that's what you see. So most people, they think they're doing their own research on search engines, but what they're really doing is eventually defaulting or surrendering their agency to other people who are doing the interpreting, the filtering, the advising for them. They think that they cut out the choke point, they cut out the middleman, they cut out the doctor because they're afraid that their doctor is not trustworthy. But what all they've really done is substituted their doctor for somebody on the internet who you have to realize is not any more trustworthy than the doctor. In fact, they're even less trustworthy, because how did you choose who to listen to on the internet? How did you choose who will be doing your filtering for you, who will be doing the recommending for you? And for many people, they choose their influencer based upon appearance, charisma, culture, politics. They look like you, they talk like you, they vote the same way as you, and they talk smoothly. They're enjoying to listen to. They're approachable, and so that's the criteria people use to make their medical decisions. Not whether they have a medical degree, not whether they've actually worked in the real world taking care of patients, but because of these criteria, and that's what the average person is using to decide whether they will listen to this person's medical advice or not. Which supplements to buy, which pills to buy, which therapies to go with. Which comes to the truth. Okay, I'm not here to talk about, I'm not here to talk about the ultimate truth. Is there an ultimate truth out there that you can judge, whether you judge your knowledge against? I don't know if there is or not. That's a question for philosophy and religion. That is way above my pay grade. If you want to know if there is an ultimate truth, go take a philosophy and religion class. But I do believe that medicine-wise, the human body is a certain way with understandable variations, and some treatments really do help and some treatments actually don't. But whether for us to know the difference can only be known through the scientific method, which is hypothesis and testing. I don't think that we as humanity will ever know everything, no matter how far in the future you go. With our limited abilities, the limited scope of our minds, we can't know everything. We can only keep getting smarter. We can only learn more and more as the years go by, but we'll never know everything. That's my belief. But how do we then know a little bit more next year than we did last year? And that's hypothesis and testing. This is science. Hypothesis, testing, getting it wrong, testing again. Working towards an ultimate truth if it exists out there. That was science, and this is the definition. Pause and read it for yourself. The Oxford English Dictionary is a worldwide established, respected source of definitions. They've been around for hundreds of years. I can trust what they say. Dogma is the opposite. If science is testing, retesting, and seeking for the truth that way, dogma is the opposite. Dogma is assuming you already have the truth and no further exploration is needed. That you have the truth already, whether it was you found it or it was told to you, and you believed it, hook, line, and sinker. And this word incontrovertibly means no possible counter or exists. What you believe is true, and nothing out there has any hope of changing your mind. This is dogma. Pause for a moment and think what other professions encourage people to think in a dogmatic way. What other lines of work are there where people say, what I believe is true and I am right. Anybody who says I'm wrong, you are wrong, and if you don't believe me, then you're stupid. Or you are tragically misinformed or something like that. That's dogma. Now, have you seen some people claiming a scientific fact, but then if you try to challenge them on it, they respond this way? Then what you've experienced, what you've witnessed, is somebody using science as dogma. That's not true science. Real science is saying, this is what we've found so far. Let me try to convince you based upon my data. And then the other scientists will say, I don't agree with you because of my data. And then the two scientists, or more than two, have a mature, logical, reasoned discussion. And it doesn't mean that one will always win immediately. It may take time. It may take years. It may take decades. It may never be solved. You could have two separate opposing points of view in science, and that's okay. each side thinking they're right, the other side is wrong, but they don't. But neither side is saying, then you're stupid. Each side is instead saying, I want to understand why you're getting your data, and I want you to understand why I'm getting my data, and let's keep talking about this. Some problems are so complicated that this kind of discussion will just keep on going for a long time. So don't assume that you can lock two scientists in a cage match and think that in about a few minutes then one of them will come out the victor. It doesn't work that way. So science is, the long and short of it is, science is a process of continuing testing and retesting and sharing of data, which means then that data needs to be free to be shared, because otherwise that's not science. What's the difference between good versus bad data? Well, it's a level of quality. Some data is high quality, some data is low quality. Not all data is created equal. And I'll get into that later in the major part of this lecture. Let me start off by saying that the scientific method is the way to sift through data and design the research so that what comes out is higher quality data, and try to minimize the risk of poor quality data or bad data. For starters, data can be biased, and the source of the bias could come from many different things, and that's a section of this lecture later on. A well-designed study will reduce the risk of bias in the data and increase the chance that increase the possibility that the data that results is even and well collected. Science research must be repeatable, because that's how other researchers can double check the original work to see if this research project was well designed. If one scientist say, this is how I did it, and these are my results, and this is why I think I'm right, and then other teams around the world all try to do the same research and they come up with completely different results, and they were never able to reproduce the original researcher's results, then the original researcher becomes kind of sus. Nobody else can reproduce your results. So reproducibility is one of the ways you know that the research was good. And I don't mean reproducibility by the same team in the same place. I mean different teams, with different biases all around the world are trying this method, and they come up with the same results as the original one, then that is like extra votes that this data is high quality. There are some topics that cannot be reproducibly tested, or cannot even be tested at all. And I'm not going to say what, but you can pause the video and think for yourself, what kinds of questions out there in the world cannot be tested by the scientific method, because there's no way to show whether a hypothesis can be proven correct or incorrect. And then if you think of one, and then later somebody says, let's test this scientifically, you'll know that science doesn't belong there. Well, here's one. Here's like one of the biggest questions of all, right? What is the meaning of life? Why were we created? Not the how, but the why were we created. I don't think science belongs in that space. But that's just my opinion. Can you think of another one, another area of questioning that takes up people's minds where science does not belong? So for the middle part, or most of this lecture, I'm going to go into the various aspects of what makes good science. And if you don't see each one of these addressed in a discussion, then it creates a red flag that maybe the person making such a scientific claim is not practicing actual science. They're practicing dogma.
they're trying to pull a fast one on you. Maybe they're practicing something else like marketing, advertising, politics. Am I putting politics in a negative light too often? Maybe I have a bias. That's probably one of my biases, that I seem to distrust politicians and the process of politics. Could be a fault of mine. Evidence. So we love to talk about evidence. Evidence is not just something in your crime dramas. It's proof. Evidence is proof that what you claim is true. And there is a quote from a very smart person, Carl Sagan. You can Google his name. Ask your grandparents if they recognize this name. They'll say something like billions and billions, and they'll put this accent on it. And that's what this person was famous for saying. He was a astrophysicist, and he was one of the early popularists of physics, meaning that physics, astrophysics, like the astronomy, it used to be only interesting to people in the academic circles, but then this fellow created a TV show that brought the general public in, and so this is the person who made astronomy popular to the general public. Anyway, and it was a very popular TV show. I liked it a lot. I remember watching it when I was a kid. He said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So if you tell me a park bench is wet paint, that's not extraordinary claims. It's like, because the city paints their park benches every once in a while, and painting for aesthetics and maintenance is not an unusual concept. So if you say, don't touch that, it's wet paint, I say fine, and I'll go find somewhere else to sit. I don't have to check it myself. I don't have to suddenly scream, conspiracy, conspiracy. I believe you. I'll walk away. If you want me to believe that a space alien came down and abducted you and told you some incredible piece of information that solves the world's problems, I'm gonna think, yeah, right, and I'm gonna try to walk away as soon as possible, because I don't really care what kind of evidence you show me. Because to date, most of the evidence people show for extraterrestrial contact are blurry pictures and videos and like scratchy audio. You really got to do better than that. And not only that, but now in these days of Photoshop, computer graphics, and artificial intelligence generated content, you really now got to step it up, because now anybody can say, well, you faked it. You faked this footage. Our AI generated video content is now available to anybody with a computer and $100. So you're going to make an extraordinary claim like space aliens made contact with you. You're going to have to show extraordinary, not just ordinary evidence, but extraordinary to convince us. Nowadays, especially in our legal climate, our litigious society, you can't do whatever you feel like. You have to have evidence backing up your justification for doing whatever you want to do to a human being. So we use the phrase evidence-based medicine, and it's not just a phrase to use. Like, you actually have to have the evidence. You have to show the articles that proves that doing it this way versus another way is superior, and the benefits versus risks are better for your patient. When articles create evidence, these articles must be rigorously checked for bias. It doesn't mean there's no bias, because if you're a human being, you have bias. Don't try to say you're the rare individual without it. Every human being has bias. So there's no way to completely get it out of the system. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And we'll talk about biases soon. That's a big problem with social media influencers claiming scientific studies or scientific conclusions, that they don't really know about scientific rigor. they're not rigorous, and because they know that their audience doesn't know about these things, because they haven't taken they haven't listened to a lecture like this. Most of their audience has not taken science classes. They have not gone on to graduate level research in science. So they are easily manipulated by these social media influencers. So anyway, back to this slide 10. So how do real scientists minimize their biases? Well, they have to think very hard and very carefully about their research design, but they have to understand that they are susceptible or vulnerable to biases themselves, unconscious bias. They try to cover for all the possible biases they may have, but they understand that there are still other biases that they don't realize they have. And that's why I know you have a bias. You listening at home, you have your own biases. Some of them you are aware of, some of them you are not aware of. So to help minimize the ones they are not aware of, they submit their manuscripts to peer review. Is when the researcher takes their finished manuscript and submit it for publication in a science journal, and that's how it gets released to the public. But before the journal publishes it, it takes this manuscript and shares it with other recognized experts of the field, or the best ones they can find. And these experts then review the papers for any potential problems. So as simple as proofreading for grammatical and spelling errors. Hopefully the original author made sure there's none in there. And then they go through and check if there are any problems that the original author never thought of putting in. Have you ever worked on a paper and thought everything was perfect, and then you asked your friend to check it, and your friend started pointing out one problem after another, and you're listening to this and you're going, oh damn, I never thought of that. Oh right, you make a good point. That's peer review. Hopefully that'll minimize all the biases as possible. But there's one problem with peer review, and the problem is that peer review is being done by human beings, and human beings have biases. Human beings are imperfect. Human beings make mistakes too. So peer review people also make mistakes. And one of the things that peer review is supposed to do is catch any potential conflicts of interest. But how do you know that the peer reviewers don't also have their own conflicts of interest? The phrase, who watches the watchers? And the real world is full of fallible people. Unfortunately, as fallible as humans are, we are still the best at this than anything else possible. So what can we do about this fallible peer review system that we can't seem to make any better? The process is involved. That we have to believe or trust in the process. Never trust an individual person. I don't care who this person is. I don't care if it's Carl Sagan. I don't care if it's the President of the United States. Never trust an individual person. But you can trust in the process that when errors are made, when corruption is found, that the system will address it and correct it. And eventually the truth comes out. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but eventually the truth comes out, and then we have effects like earlier results say that drinking alcohol improves length of life, and then later results show that drinking alcohol actually does not improve the length of life. It's not that the individual scientists can't make up their minds, is that earlier scientists making earlier experiments find one result, and then later scientists make later experiments and find another result, and then we combine all of this data all together, and we get closer and closer to the truth. That's science. Where were we? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about finer points of evidence now. Okay. But anyway, your friend comes up and says, I did it. I invented a cure for bird flu. And the price of eggs can finally come back down. And you say, yeah, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And they say, no, believe me. Here, check this out. My cat has bird flu. Not me, I don't own a cat. I mean, hypothetically, this guy says my cat has bird flu. And I took these ingredients that you can buy at Home Depot gardening section, and I mixed them together and I gave it to my cat, and now my cat doesn't have bird flu and my cat is fine. Oh my goodness. Anyway, you say, well, good for you, stay away from me, but good for you, and don't stay away from my dog. But anyway, you say, you know what, you go tweet about it or text about it, you put it on Facebook about it, see how, good luck with that. So he does, and he gets lots of likes and subs and followers and gets very popular and everybody tries it. So anyway, he talks about how he mixed these ingredients together, in what proportions, how they can buy it from Home Depot, and how to give it to their cat. And this is how you show if your cat had bird flu, and this is how you test if your cat no longer had bird flu. Anyway, he did it to his cat, and that proves he's right. Does it prove he's right? Well, since I've been talking over this slide, obviously the answer is no. What this person showed or will write about is an anecdote. An anecdote is one story. In fact, an anecdote goes beyond number one. Any number of tests that are insufficient to prove a rule. The test was not done a sufficient number of times to satisfy a serious scientist, a real statistician. Statistician is called an anecdote. So if you did it to one cat, or if you did it to 5 of the neighborhood cats, you should get arrested and thrown in jail. But anyway, if you only did it to a few test subjects, that still does not show proof. It is only an anecdote. So next time somebody tells you a story of how it worked on one person, your uncle took a pill and he feels better. Your cousin tried it and he felt fine. Or your aunt tried this new therapy and it made her feel horrible. It does not prove that the same results will happen to you. Why do people depend on the anecdotal stories of their close friends and family, even though I just said that one test does not prove the rule? Because we tend to believe our close friends and family more than a bunch of strangers. So if a stranger tells you that they tested it on 3,000 subjects and most of them it worked, and there's been a few side effects, and a couple of the side effects, people with side effects went to the hospital and one of them died, but like 2,900 of the subjects all felt great and it cured them, you're not going to believe them. You're not going to believe them because there's a bunch of strangers, has nothing to do with you. But if your neighbor said, remember that vaccine, that vaccine that's been in the news, everybody's supposed to get it? Well, I took that vaccine and now I have diarrhea and I feel horrible. So you're going to think, oh, and you like this neighbor. The neighbor is somebody you like and respect. Then you're going to say, that's it, I'm not going to get the vaccine based on one experience, one test case. To you, I say, that's an anecdote. A public health official who recommends a vaccine to address a certain need, that vaccine will work on the majority of people. You should get it too. Talk to your doctor first. Okay. This anecdotal experience is, I'm going to simplify to this model of the coin flip, right? When you flip a coin, what are the chances you get heads or tail? It should be 50-50. It's like flipping a coin once, only once, and the result is a head or tail, whatever you want. And then you scream, oh my God, this coin is unfair. I flipped it, I got a head instead of a tail. Therefore, it proves that this coin is bad. Of course not. You may think, don't be silly. This is a stupid example. Of course, the coin, that one flip does not prove the coin is bad. Why don't I just pick it up and look at both sides? Then that'll show you if it's no. So, but then you go to like a gambling establishment, and then just the fact that it has a head side and a tail side doesn't prove that the coin is fair, because some coins can be weighted on one side to the other, so it makes one side come up more often, and then that's not a fair coin. So how do you test if a coin is fair? Well, you flip it a bunch of times. What if you flip it 10 times and came up 9 tails, 1 head? Does it prove the coin is a bad coin? Well, in a gambling establishment, maybe that's good enough and it's rejected as a coin. But statistically, 1 in 9 does not prove the coin is bad, actually, because it is very possible. It's not probable, as a low probability of occurring, 1 in 9, but 1 to 9, but it is very possible. And if we took 100 people and entered them into a coin flipping contest with all of them flipping good coins, then it's very reasonable that at least one of their contestants will experience the 1 to 9 result. If you're hearing a dog barking in the background, it's my landlord's dog. He's very cute, and he's a tiny little white fluffy thing, adorable. But sometimes something triggers him. I wonder if it's my voice. Maybe the fact that I'm recording a lecture is triggering him. But I've heard the dog go off on other things when I'm staying quiet, minding my own business. Anyway, I hope it's not intrusive. You can still hear me talking. So, 100 tosses of a coin, it's very possible to get a 1 to 9 result. So it doesn't prove that the coin is good or bad. How many times should you flip a coin to get to that 50-50 result that everybody's expecting out of a fair and honest coin? Well, this computer science experiment that somebody did, it doesn't really matter. I don't really care who did this or why or how, because it doesn't. You don't have to search far to get a different result, because at 200 tosses you get close to the 40 to 60 and ratio, 40% to 60% ratio, and I can easily see another round of 200 tosses getting something different, like 45, 55, or 35, 65. It's all within the realm of plausibility. But anyway, after 200 tosses, this computer science exercise came to 40%, 60%. So how many tosses does it take to get to 49.51? 49.51, and I can imagine you would need like 1,000 tosses or maybe 2,000 tosses. At this point, you're thinking, can we give this probability and statistics a rest? I mean, many of you can barely do high school level math. Talking of probability and statistics is really making you sleepy. And besides, people are not coins. People are way more complicated, and we're talking about real life, real health. We're not talking about a stupid coin. But the idea is the same. If you test your new drug on one human being, you're basically doing this thing where you're saying, where you're giving an anecdote, and the chances that your patient improved or got worse is just as likely to be because of a random occurrence or some detail about their medical condition that nobody predicted, or it's because your pill really did work. We're going to revisit this and apply this concept to therapies, medical therapies, and evidence-based medical therapies. But now a few things about bias. Okay, so bias is sometimes is unintentional, sometimes it's intentional. Like outright racism is a bias, and sometimes people are like consciously doing it. They know they're biased against color of somebody's skin, or the religion, or the where in the world this person came from, or where in the country this person came from. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's non-intentional. I've run into lots of people who say, I have no bias. No, I have no bias at all. I love everybody. Yeah. But then through like a short conversation, I can identify like they do have certain biases in certain things. So religious and racial bias is like the most obvious example. Culture bias is an obvious example, but there are many, many others that you may not have heard of. For example, sampling bias. When the number of coin flips is too small, oh my God, there he is with the coins again. When the number of patients you study is too small, just one patient or only 10 patients, then that's sampling bias. Selection bias. You want to do a study about affordable pricing in New York City. So you design a study and you need to like survey, some homeowners and ask about how affordable things are. And so you open up your address book and you decide, to save money on my subway trips, I'm going to only survey the people who live right next to Central Park, New York City, Manhattan. Only those apartments that are across the street from Central Park. That way it'll save time, it'll save money, and I'll still get the numbers I want, and then I'll become like very popular and everybody will think I'm so smart. And so you take this design to your research advisor, and your research advisor asks like, were you born stupid or did you have to work at it? And you say, what the hell? How dare you insult me? And the research advisor says, think. Take a deep breath and think. Where are you studying? Where are you doing this study? And you say, Central Park. And you're saying, your study is about affordability of housing? Yeah, so what? Who lives around Central Park? Have you looked at the buildings there? Have you done like a simple Google search for income levels around Central Park? This is where the richest people of New York City live. The Central Park apartments, hotels are among the most priciest real estate in New York City. And you want to do a study on real estate affordability on only those places, you're committing selection bias. Some people if you want to do a true cross-sectional analysis of affordability, you need to expand your search area. Yes, you have to pay a lot of mass transit tolls so you can distribute your survey packets to way a larger area. Rich areas, poor areas, middle class areas, all kinds of selection criteria. So that's a selection bias. If you're not careful about who your subjects are or where they came from, then you're committing selection bias. Researcher bias. Scientists are people too. They have conflicts of interest. If their day job, if their full-time job is getting research results, and their payment, their income, is based upon their status in the academic society, which is based on the success of their research, then they have a financial interest in the success of their research, which means as their data is coming in, there will be this temptation to fudge the numbers a little bit to make them look good. So researchers have to design their studies which limits their ability to interfere. How do you do that? We'll talk about researcher bias soon. Okay. Culture bias, we mentioned already. Response bias. You mail a survey to a lot of people. I don't know about you guys, but most of the time when I get an email request for a survey or a snail mail, postal mail request, I usually throw those away. I just delete them. Because I don't have that kind of time. It's rare for me to be willing to partake in a survey. So if there's a survey that is like perfect for me, like directed, is designed specifically for people like me, for me to not participate is going to reduce the validity of that survey because it doesn't count my answers. If there's a survey that has nothing to do with me, but I insist on taking it anyway, I'm going to muddy the data. I'm going to input data that is not really meant for me. If you do a survey on diets, like how much people are eating, exactly what are they eating, then sometimes people report the partial truth or they flat out lie about what they're eating. Sometimes they intentionally lie, sometimes they unintentionally forget that they ate 6 donuts today instead of only 2. So when the survey asks how many pastries did you eat today, they say only a couple, but they actually ate 6. So that's response bias. People forget, people lie, people are ashamed, or people are nervous. Maybe they're worried that depending on their answers, they may get punished. Like somebody may come after them if they say the wrong thing, if they say something that people in power don't want to hear. So these are response biases. Something that I've been noticing lately in the general internet comment space, people are committing survivor bias. What they're doing is they're looking at people, they're looking at famous people and making conclusions on like the secrets of success based upon studying only that famous person. What they're doing is committing survivor bias, which is that in order to really know what the secret of success is, you have to not only study the people who made it, but you have to also carefully look at all the people who tried and failed, who tried and died. If we take 100 people and put them in a coin flipping contest, oh my God, there's the coins again. Can we start talking about real people? Well, come on, just bear with me. If you took 100 people and put them in a coin flipping tournament and eventually there's a winner, this winner will come out thinking that over the last several rounds he won a coin flip. He won a coin flip several times in a row. This person is going to walk away thinking today is my lucky day. But some people politely use the word luck. Some people say today God was shining on me, or today God was favoring me. And other people, and let's say the stakes are high, like the winner got $1,000, so everybody is envious of the guy who won this tournament, talking amongst themselves, why did he win, why didn't I win? And then they start making conclusions like he was wearing a red shirt today, or he was sitting up straight for every coin flip, or he had his right foot forward instead of his left foot. They're trying to think of all the ways, all the possible explanations why this person won instead of somebody else. The reality is that anybody could have won. It was completely, truly random. All the coins were honest and fair. It's just that somebody had to win. But now everybody is thinking it must be this reason, or it's got to be the shoes, or it's got to be what they ate. And so they ask them, like, what did you eat this morning? Or what was your strategy? What strategy? It's a coin flip. It's totally random. All right, you want to talk about real people? Are you done talking about coins? Here's another example. During World War II, researchers noticed that warplanes that came back from their missions had the most bullet holes in the wings. So they decided that, since they're suffering from so many bullet holes in the wings, to improve survivability, we should put extra armor plating on the wings so they'll get less bullet holes, so that more of our pilots can come back home from their missions. That's survivor bias. What they're not studying are the people who did not come back. Because guess what? If they saw the people who came, if they had a chance to, not that they could, but maybe like long after the war is over, and researchers are finally allowed to visit all the planes that crashed, failed in their mission, they will find bullet holes in the middle of the plane, where the pilot sits, where the engine is, where the control lines are. That's where the mortal bullet holes were that prevented planes from coming back. So if you really wanted to improve survivability of your pilots, you really should armor the middle of the plane, not the wings. Survivor bias. Here's something that's absolutely in the internet nowadays, and people have always been making this error, but it's really coming to the front with the internet generation, which is confirmation bias. It goes a little something like this. Have you ever noticed that you're always on the slow line of the supermarket checkout? Have you ever noticed that? Or at the bank, or at the toll booth on the highway? You're always on the slow line. What's up with that? Are the gods trying to get you? Is the system set up against you? Is it just not fair? What's going on? This is confirmation bias. What happens is, when you are on the slow lane, then you feel frustration and you start cursing, and you say things to yourself like, I'm always on the slow line. The world is out to get me. It's those damn whatever group of people you like to hate. It's never your fault. It's so see what I'm talking about? I'm always on the slow line. So you have a world view that you are always on the slow line, and here is evidence that you are. So you focus on it. You spend a lot of time paying attention to it, remembering it, and in the future, these memories are going to last, and you're going to remember this time in the future and say, see, I'm on the slow line again. It always happens to me. The times where you are on the fast line, you don't think about, hey, I'm on the fast line, I must have been wrong. This time I'm on the fast line, so my assumption that I'm always on the slow line must be wrong. No, nobody ever says that. First of all, nobody ever says I'm wrong. If you see evidence that proves you're wrong, then most people, especially people who are not aware of this bias, will try to think of all possible reasons why actually they're not wrong, they're right, but there are these other extraneous factors. Anyway, when you're on the fast line, instead your mind is busy thinking of other things, like what are you going to do when you get to your destination? Are you late for work? You're going to the store. You're going to another store. What are you supposed to buy for that other store? Whose birthday are you preparing for? So you're thinking of all kinds of other things as your life is on pace. You never spend time thinking that, hey, I'm on the fast line. So you don't remember being on the fast line because you don't form those memories. So later, when you think back on your experiences on lines, you only remember the times you were on the slow line. This is confirmation bias. What about other things you really believe in? what happens when you see evidence that confirms your worldview? You put extra attention on it. When you see evidence that contradicts your worldview, you discount. You say, nah, that doesn't count because, and then you come up with all kinds of excuses. That's confirmation bias. I say this is a special problem today in the internet age because of social media algorithms. Social media algorithms are literally encoding confirmation bias into everybody's experience. And it goes a little something like this. Whatever social media you use, YouTube or Facebook or anything else, people are uploading content, lots of content every day. Millions of megabytes per hour are being uploaded as we speak. You cannot possibly see everything that's being uploaded. So what happens? These social media algorithms look at what you have watched and liked before and show you more of it. They look at what you have watched and did not like before and show you less of it. So more and more, the algorithm shows you more of what you want to see and less of what you don't want to see. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? You see more of what you want to see that supports your worldview and less of what you don't want to see that contradicts your worldview. So somebody makes a political joke, but it is in favor of your political party. You like it, you sub it, you share it, and you get more jokes that support your political party, and then vice versa. You see less jokes that make fun of and hate on your political party. Eventually, you surround yourself what are called echo chambers. An echo chamber is when, you know what an echo is, right? You yell into a mountain valley, and then you hear your own voice bounced back. So you and the people who believe in the same thing you do are just sharing each other's social media posts. You only see each other's social media posts and other content creators who believe in the same thing you do, and you never see or rarely see posts from people who contradict your worldview. You are in these echo chambers and you keep convincing each other, yeah, you're right, yeah, you're right, yeah, you're right. Oh my, and those people are stupid, those people are wrong, can't they see they're wrong? Oh, they're so dumb. And you keep telling each other that over and over again. You never get evidence that what your worldview is may be off the mark, not reflecting true reality, the real world. You just see your version of what you think is the real world. These are echo chambers. The internet and social media algorithms are breaking up society into these reinforced concrete echo chambers. I'm a little worried about what's going to happen from now on. And then here's another problem now. People who claim to use science on the internet, if you are living in this echo chamber, when you Google or Bing or whatever your favorite search engine is, if you search for evidence or data or research, by being in this echo chamber, you only get articles that support your worldview. You will only see the articles you want to see that say you're right. Where is it? And which reverts back here, and you miss the context. You don't read all the articles. You don't get the context. In fact, you only see half the world, half of reality. You only see the facts that you want. So that was a few biases that I talked about, and it's only a few. There are many, many more. Here's a nice little YouTube video. It's entertaining, it's approachable, it uses simple language, and it talks about many other kinds of biases, right? There are many more different kinds of biases than there are in this video, but at least there's a bunch more here. And one of your homework assignments, it will ask you to think of another one. Can you think of another kind of bias that is not mentioned at all in this lecture? If you mention something that is mentioned in this lecture, if you talk about a bias that is already mentioned in this lecture, you will not get credit for that answer. You will get 0 points for that answer. You must talk about a bias that is not mentioned in this lecture. A little more about probability. Oh no, he's going to talk about coins again. No, I promise, no more coins. From now on, it's people. We're talking about people now. But when you're talking about enough people to get beyond the sample size bias, you're going to talk numbers, unfortunately. So pick it up. Get good at high school math so that you can understand what's going on here. When somebody says a medical therapy is guaranteed or perfectly safe, they are lying. Maybe they're not intentionally lying, but they're saying something that is not true. No therapy in medicine is perfectly safe. No poison is perfectly lethal. It's always something in between. It's not 100% or 0% of anything. It's somewhere in the middle. Everything in medicine has a side effect. There's no such thing as zero risk. Even an ambulance ride to the hospital has a side effect. You could get into a car accident. Even oxygen, oxygen is something everybody needs to live. How could it possibly have a side effect if an incompetent healthcare provider gives you too much oxygen? It actually causes problems. In fact, sometimes just living ordinary life ends up giving us a little too much oxygen. That's why we have something called antioxidant foods. Ever heard of that? Antioxidants? Like blueberries are a great antioxidant. Most fruits are a great antioxidant. What's going on there? And it's beyond the scope of this lecture, but when we talk about nutrition, I'll talk about antioxidants. That said, I don't want you to limit your oxygen intake. Okay, please, if you are please do not minimize or reduce how much you breathe. You need to breathe to live. Please breathe well. But too much medical grade, high concentrated oxygen is bad for you. So, what else? Water. Water is the stuff of life. We're 70% water. How can water be bad? Too much water is bad. You can drown. Okay, seriously, if you force yourself to drink too much water, then you can dilute your blood so much that your electrolyte concentrations drop so much that you go into seizure and cardiac arrest. And I've seen that happen. On an especially hot day, and somebody is told to hydrate, so they overhydrate, and then they really mess up their electrolytes. But that was like a sheer force of will. I've never seen somebody drink that much on purpose. So that only happened once in my ambulance experience. So everything in medicine, it has risk. But some things in medicine has more risk and some has less. Some things in medicine has a higher chance of helping you. Some things in medicine has less of a chance in helping you. So how are you supposed to know whether to take one thing or another? You're not really supposed to know. That's not your job. Your job is to be the patient. Your job is to get a second opinion. So if a doctor suggests you do something, you don't have to believe that person immediately and completely. If there is any suspicion that the doctor has a conflict of interest or is incompetent, of course you can go get a second opinion. But you really want to let the experts handle this. Get a second opinion from an expert. Don't get a second opinion from a social media influencer. Am I being too down on social media influencers? I'm sure there are many social media influencers who do a good job. In fact, throughout my classes, when you take a class with me, I'm going to post some videos and from YouTube channels of various content creators that I've agreed mostly with, like 90% of the time with. The problem is that out there is not only many angels and good people, good honest people, but there are also a lot of con artists and fakers who are just there to take your money. So if I had to paint them all with one color only, I'm going to paint them all with the color of suspicion. So all medicine is not perfectly safe, but it's not perfectly evil either. So we're talking about relative risk. Vaccines, the ones that are approved for public use, and there's a very rigorous process to approve a vaccine for use, the ones that do get through this process still have a non-zero risk. And if we take the COVID vaccines, so there are studies and reports of people who have severe side effects from COVID vaccine, no matter which one it is. But the vast majority of people, the millions of people who took it, were helped. And so that is the job of the public health official and your doctor, to evaluate the risks of side effects versus the benefits, and see if it's justified. Is the benefit to you, the chance of benefiting you, like on the high end, is it worth the risk that you may be one of the people with a serious side effect? And for the vast majority of us, it is worth the risk. The benefits outweigh the risk. And other vaccinations, especially the childhood vaccinations, have saved millions of lives every year. Yes, there are a few kids, a small percentage of kids, who do suffer side effects from these vaccinations. But until we know if the child will or will not, it's still worth it, because the risk of the side effects of vaccines is lower than the risks of letting them get the full-blown natural illness that the vaccine was trying to stop. Way more kids have suffered and died from these childhood diseases like polio, rubella, measles, mumps, whooping cough, influenza. These kill way more kids if left unprotected. So the vaccines do help. So the question now for you is, I know somebody who got the vaccine. Let me flip these slides. I know somebody who got the vaccine and got infected anyway. I know somebody who didn't get the vaccine and never got infected. So what's going on here? Like I said, all medical therapies have non-zero risk, and they don't help everybody equally. This is called the bell curve because it's in the shape of a bell. The height of the graph represents the number of people. So when a medical therapy is approved, then most of the people, their response will be around in the middle, and most of the people will be benefited from the therapy, whether it's vaccines or splinting a broken leg or giving oxygen for somebody who has difficulty breathing. There will be a small percentage of people who suffer a serious side effect, and then a small percentage of people for whom it doesn't help at all. By the way, these numbers don't mean anything. This is just a carryover from the source I copied it from. He committed plagiarism. I did not make this graph, but it's a common graph. And these are the statistical standards here. So if you know somebody who got the vaccine, got sick anyway, or if you know somebody who got the vaccine and had a serious side effect, they're probably going to be somewhere around here. And then if you know somebody who got the vaccine and didn't get helped, they're maybe around here. The question now is, should you get the vaccine? And unless you know in advance what kind of medical condition will complicate or interfere with a vaccine until you actually take it, now you have to like throw the dice. Not flip a coin, but throw the dice. Where are you likely to end up on this graph? Are you an unusually exceptional person? Or are you an average person medically? So the question is, should you get the vaccine? And unless you've not had a negative experience or adverse experience with the vaccine in the past, then the recommendation is you do get the vaccine. As always, consult your doctor. So what do these lines and graphs mean? A bell curve is a measurement of some number, whether it's height or grades or money or the time it takes to commute to school or how many calories you eat per day or your response to a vaccination. Anything that's measurable will be here along this line, like 0 to whatever you're measuring, and then the number of people along the height of the graph will represent the average person. So like height, the average height is 5'7", I believe, in this country, or whatever, like somewhere between 5 and 6 feet tall. That's between 5 and 6 feet tall. That's the average height, and that's where most of us are. Do you know of people who are over 6 feet tall? They're here. Ignore these numbers. They're here. Do you know somebody who is over 7 feet tall? They're all the way over here. Do you know somebody who is less than 5 feet tall? They're over here. Do you know somebody who is less than 3 feet tall? They're over here. This is how the bell curve works. So where are you? Whatever this is, grades, money, commuting time, how many calories you eat per day. Where are you? I don't know you. I haven't met you yet. But if I was a betting person, I would say you are here. So you're somewhere between 5 and 6 feet tall. How much money do you have? You're probably living in a middle class family, unless you are upper middle class or rich, etc., 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 etc. So this is the bell curve. A common fallacy among people who don't know science is that correlation is not causation. Two fancy SAT words. Correlation means two things happen around the same time. Causation is that one thing caused the other. In science, this is not a valid conclusion to make. At best, this is an anecdote, and you have to take way more studies. Because what we find is that in reality, sometimes it's just a coincidence. The two things never really had a causational relationship. They just two things that happened to have happened around the same time. And the most famous fallacy in science, in medicine, for this error is that vaccinations cause autism. A long time ago, a doctor in Britain made a report claiming that vaccines cause autism, and it went viral like crazy. Not viral, medical viral, but internet viral, or their version of it. It spread like wildfire among the non-scientific community, because what happened? If you're a parent and you're a new parent, you just had a brand new baby, and everybody's happy, you have plans and dreams of this baby's future, your family is now overflowing with love, and then around the second year of life, you notice your baby is not acting like you expect a baby to act, and you take your baby to the pediatrician for their regular checkup and mention this, and the pediatrician takes the cue and does some extra tests and then gives you the devastating news, I'm sorry, your child has autism. As a parent, as a normal parent, what should you do, and what do you do? What do you do? And the logical thing for you to do is to look for someone or something to blame. Do your research, and you start hearing about vaccinations, where these articles say, depending on who, what kinds of social groups you hang around in, you get articles saying that vaccines cause autism. And you think about it and go, yeah, you're right. Since my baby was born, doctors keep sticking needles in my baby, injecting who knows what. You know what? Those things must have caused my baby's autism. Correlation, causation. It turns out it's not true. Study after study after study has proven there's no cause. But I know of one study that does show a cause. You haven't read enough studies. There's an overwhelming contrary study showing that there's no cause. But there's one study that does. That's the problem with reading only one article or a few articles. The anti-vaccine community shares their favorite articles and completely discounts all the other articles that show that there is no correlation. Then what is there another explanation why these two events happen around the same time? Okay, this is not the purpose of this lecture, but I will very quickly and oversimplified way say that autism is a problem with social interaction. And so when does a parent recognize social interaction behavior in their baby? Around the 2nd year of life. It's possible that this baby had autism since the beginning. It might be in the DNA. It could be something during development in the 9 months in the womb. It could be something in the moment of birth. But something happened that gave this child autism since they were born. But for the first 2 years, nobody would have noticed it. Because in the first 2 years, the baby is not a social creature. I know your baby smiles at you. Your first-year-old smiles at you. But your first-year-old will smile at anything. You put 2 dots and a semicircle on a piece of paper, the baby will smile at it. The baby is not a social individual in the first year of life. How do you know when the baby is finally able to express their own opinions? When the baby says no. The letters N-O. The baby says no. Oh, well, the baby's translated version of no. When the baby refuses to comply, refuses to go potty or put on the shirt or coat, wear the hat, the baby is in their terrible twos. That's when the baby is finally able to express their own identity. And then around the 2nd year of age. And what has happened up to the 2nd year of life? The baby got a battery of vaccinations, needles of this or that. It seems like every time you visit the pediatrician, the baby got a shot. So the parent sees the two things happen, and then notice the autism in the 2nd year of life, 3rd year of life, toddler years, and the parents look for somewhere to blame, somebody to blame, some place to blame, and they look at vaccinations. But study after study has shown that there's no causation. It's just a correlation. That overwhelming scientific data does not stop these experts from saying there is causation, because facts don't weigh these people down. They live in their concrete encased echo chambers and believe what they want to believe. What I just explained is an example of something called a confounder or confounding variable. If two things happen around the same time but one doesn't cause the other, it could be that there's a third thing that causes the first two. Here's another example of a confounder. People who are treated by doctors tend to die sooner. That's true. That's absolutely true. People who have been seen by doctors more tend to die sooner than people who have been seen by doctors less. Does this mean that you should not see a doctor? That way you can live as long as possible? And I hope your thought is, of course not. If I'm sick, I will go see a doctor. And that's the confounder. People who are very sick go to doctors more. People who are very sick die sooner. People who are not sick go to doctors less. And people who are not sick tend to live longer. Being sick is the confounding variable. The placebo effect is an incredibly powerful psychological phenomenon. Placebo effect is the power of the human mind to cause their body to show symptoms simply on the power of belief. What happens is when you make somebody believe strong enough, they not only feel different, but they can even show differences in their physical body. That is the placebo effect. Whenever I show you a YouTube video, it's not some dry old guy talking about a dry old subject. It's I carefully choose YouTube videos that are entertaining, full of animation, very nice and approachable and kind person, speaking very eloquently and interestingly. These people have lots of charisma, unlike me. So that's why I use these videos, because these people have all the things that I don't have. So if you want to know more about the placebo effect, watch this YouTube video. It'll be very entertaining and very informative. Anyway, one of the earlier documented cases of the placebo effect was during wartime. There were wounded soldiers in the hospital in terrible pain, and they used morphine, which is a painkiller, but they ran out of it. And out of desperation, they put plain salt water in the morphine bottles, and in front of the patient, drew the saline salt water out into the syringe and injected it into the patients. And miracle of miracles, the patients, all of them expressed relief of pain. How is this possible? It's just salt water. What's going on? And they found that it was the power of suggestion. The doctors and the nurses looked very much like very doctory and nursey. They were in a hospital setting. The needle hurt like hell. And so everything about that performance art made the patients believe that they were getting real morphine, and they really got it. The placebo effect is a trick of the mind. Once you make the patient even suspect that the medication was not real, the placebo effect evaporates like a soap bubble popped in the wind. It will disappear immediately. So no, we can't put it in a bottle and sell it. Or can we? So not in this lecture, but I'll talk about a group of industry entrepreneurs who have tried to put placebo in a bottle and sold it. And they're literally selling plain water in a bottle full of fancy scientific words on the label. And people are drinking it and pouring money into that company, and tricking the people are tricking themselves into thinking it's real and feeling real medical benefit. The placebo effect is powerful, and before you think that's not going to work on me, I'm too smart for that, you give me something fake, it's not going to work on me, man. Nobody can influence me like that. No. If you are a human being, you are vulnerable to the power of suggestion. What you mean to say is people who don't look like the kind of people you tend to trust cannot fool you. But people who do look like the kind of people you tend to trust can fool you. So people who look like that, who talk like that, who sing like that, who vote the same way you do, who does everything right, they walk the walk, they talk the talk, you will believe them, and they can play mind games with you. Not everybody who looks like that is honest and upfront. You have a lot of con artists out there. Wait, am I suggesting that placebo effect is like a con, is like a criminal activity? Well, if it's intentionally done that way, and they never alert the patient the possibility, then yes, it is immoral, illegal. So now that I put it in the context of a power of suggestion effect, where else have you seen it? Other than a hospital setting, other than a scientific setting, where else is the placebo effect in action? Everywhere. Placebo effect is everywhere in life. It is absolutely a part of restaurants. In the lighting, in the decoration, in the music, in the presentation on the plate. If they gave the exact same food, prepared exactly the same way, but put it over a ugly plate in a dingy restaurant, and the waiter was rude to you, and the price was like unacceptable, you would not like it. It will taste horrible. Many people have accused the wine connoisseurs of suffering from the placebo effect. There's nothing really different about the different wines. They were giving a grade of like high, medium, or low. It's just their subjective interpretation. Advertising is all about setting up the placebo effect, making you want to be like the person on the TV screen, or the fashion model, or the driver of the car. They want to make you want to be like that, so that you will buy the product. And it's absolutely a part of politics. Politics is about tricking people into voting the way they want you to, if you just trust them, believe in them. So, remember that guy who had the pill and he tried it on his cat? He evades the law. He emails you from another country and says, remember me, I did this thing on the cat and I proved it works. One of the complaints you had was that my experiment suffered from sampling error. So what I did was I rounded up 100 people, so it's no more cats. I promise, no more cats. I found 100 volunteers, and I gave them my potion, and they all had the disease, and so bird flu. They all had bird flu, and so I made this potion in this other country, and I gave it to 100 people, and 60 of them got cured of bird flu. The other 40, I'm not sure what's going on, but it didn't work. So after this lecture, you're wondering, I wonder how much of this is the placebo effect. That this guy is pretty charismatic. You have to give him that. A smooth talker, he looks very smart, he looks honest. He's not, but he looks honest. So he's very convincing. Anyway, he tricked 100 people into trying his new drug. And 60 said they felt better. Did it work? Or how much of it was the placebo effect? How would you know? What you do is ask him, did you do a single blind study? Did you have a control group who got the fake drug? And he says, what the hell are you talking about? And you explain to him, a control group, in order to have a single blind study. Blind, by the way, is when the patient doesn't know what they're getting. So the word blind is a hunting term, where a hunter is like trying to hunt ducks, will hide themselves behind cover so the ducks can't see them, and that cover is a blind. So anyway, the control group is you have to divide your people into two groups. One of them gets the real treatment that you want, but then the other group gets a fake treatment, a fake pill, a fake potion that looks exactly the same, tastes the same, feels the same, but it has no active ingredient in it. And then you watch the two of them and see what happens. And then you compare the two. So the guy says, all right, I'll get back to you. A few months later, you get another email saying, okay, he found 200 people. 100 people he gave his real potion, and he found 60% said they felt better, 40 said not. And then he made this fake potion and he gave it to another group of 100 people, and 70 of them said they felt better, and 30 said they did not. So what happened? Not only did the real thing not help your patient, but it seems that the real thing is even weaker than the placebo. Not only does his real potion did not help his patients, but it actually did worse than a fake pill, a fake potion. It was better to have given his patients the fake thing, all 200 of them. So what does this guy do? He could like fudge his numbers and make it look better, and then try to like, well, it's too late to convince you, but like the next time when with other investors, he could like change the numbers to make his real pill look better. Or what if he says, okay, I have another great idea. How about I just sell the fake potion? Since it works so good, 70 out of 100, I'm going to sell my fake potion, say it's the real thing, and I'm going to take advantage of the placebo effect. And do you mind investing in my business? And you say, you know what? And your reply is, please don't email me anymore. I'm going to block you. Okay, so that's the placebo effect. This is called a single blind study. The patient doesn't know what they're getting. About that entrepreneur who's trying to invent a new pill, and he has this idea, okay, since the placebo effect turns out to be better than the real thing, what I'm going to do for my future investors, my future sales pitch, I'm going to change the numbers. So instead of 70 of them feeling better, I'm going to fake the numbers so that only 30 of them feel better, 70 do not. And that way it makes my pill, my potion, look like it's really working. That is researcher bias. That's a conflict of interest. The researcher is literally committing fraud. Now, I'm not saying all researchers in the world commit fraud. I'm just saying that as human beings, we have temptation to respond to conflicts of interest. So is there any way to reduce that temptation, to take it away from honest researchers? And there is. It's called a double-blind study. This time, not only the patient doesn't know what they're getting, but the researcher doesn't know what they're getting either. How is that possible? If you're a researcher, aren't you supposed to be in charge of who gets what? Well, there are many ways to double blind a study. One of the most obvious ones is you, instead of the name of the potion on the container, you put a random ID number. And then instead of the name of the patient, you give every patient a random ID number. And in the record books, you only record these ID numbers. So you only keep track of which patient number got which drug number. That way, as the information comes in, as the results come in, the researcher has no option other than to just record ID number to ID number. And then when it's all over, when it's all done, then the true identity of these ID numbers are revealed. And now it's too late for the researcher to fudge the numbers. It's there. It's on the paper already. It's on the records already. All the researcher can do is acknowledge it and then graph the results appropriately. That is a double-blind study, and the double-blind study is now the gold standard of research, of experimental research. If your research design does not include double blinds, it is fast-tracked to the garbage can at the journal for publication. What I just described was an example of an experimental study. By having the experimental group and the control group, by being double blinded, that is enough suppression or control of bias to prove cause. So experimental studies can prove cause. There's another kind of research study out there called observational, and there they can only prove correlation, which means the two things you're studying happen around the same time, but it cannot prove that one caused the other. Why would they do that? Why would they spend all this money and time and then end up not being able to prove a cause? Well, sometimes experiments depending on the topic, sometimes experiments are just not practical. It is just cannot be done, or to do it is unethical. What about a pill? What about a disease that's like literally life and death, and then you have a therapy that you know can save their lives? How can you ethically withhold it from half the people just to do an experimental study to have a control group? That's unethical. So you can't do it that way. What about pragmatic? If you do a dietary study, what you have to do is ask people to keep a diary of what they eat day after day, and there's no way to control that, because there's no way to know for sure if what they're eating really is what they're eating, or if they have some kind of response bias. You cannot take a bunch of people, not Americans at least, keep them in cages and force feed them only a strict recipe menu. That's unethical. It's illegal. It's illegal according to the Constitution of the United States. So no, you can't do a experimental study on diets. Length of life. You can't do an experimental study on length of life. What are you going to do? Hold on to people for the duration of their life? So no, that's called imprisonment. No, you can't do that. So some studies can only be observational. It cannot be experimental. Experimental separates volunteers, ethical, right? Volunteers into two groups, or at least two groups. One of them is the experimental group. The other one is the placebo or control group. And then you compare the results, and now you can prove causality. Once the therapy does help, or the therapy does not help. Observational, all you can do is watch. That's all. Ever seen those nature documentaries where the biologist sits a little distance away from like a troop of animals, a flock of birds, or a clan of monkeys, and just watches? That's observational. The key to observation is that you do not interfere with whatever they're naturally doing. Experimental, you absolutely do interfere. You strictly control what goes in, what goes out, what they eat. You strictly measure, and literally keeping them in petri dishes or cages or hospital rooms. Observational, you can't do that, so you can just watch. If you want to do an observational study on dietary habits of college students at lunchtime, you go to the cafeteria here. You sit there with your clipboard and you just watch people eat, and they come and go. You cannot control their behavior. You can just observe their behavior. So observational studies cannot show cause. But you can notice correlation. So you can notice that two things tend to happen around the same time whenever they do. You can't prove one caused the other, but you can show that they do happen to happen around the same time. This is often reported as linked or associated or correlated. So in the future, when you hear a news reporter talk about there is a link between chocolate and obesity, or there is a link between coffee and heart disease, or there is an association between red wine and length of life, or there is a correlation between fatty foods and athletic ability. These are all observational studies. It didn't prove that red wine extends life. They just saw that people who happen to drink red wine a lot seem to live longer. But then they completely forgot to mention that people who tend to drink red wine are eating Mediterranean diets, or the people who they did study. The people they did study, like coastal regions of Italy. So they found that those folks tended to drink a moderate amount of red wine, like once per meal, 1 glass per meal, and they tended to live longer. But then they didn't mention that those people also ate lots of fish, high in omega-3. They ate lots of vegetables and fiber. They ate very little processed foods, and all of that was left out. So people walked away reading that reading that journal and thinking, red wine extends life. But actually, it turns out it was not the red wine that extended their life. It was the fish, the wild caught fish. It was the high vegetable fiber. It was the minimal processed foods. Those are what actually extend life. So if observational studies cannot prove causation, then why bother having observational studies? Because all of these links and associations is extra data. Slide 38. It's extra data. It's an observational study is like one of these blind men reporting what they got. And then you combine that with another observational report and another observational report and another observational report. And then if you combine them all together, you have this growing body of views on what the real thing actually is. And you get closer and closer to the truth. That is the benefit of an observational study. Where was that? Slide 36. Yeah. So that's the benefit. That's the justification of an observational study. And there's something else too. What if you tried to see if there was a correlation between wearing a blue hat and being an A student, like getting good grades in college? So you went around and observed class after class after class. You got the professor's permission to look at their grade scores. I'm not sure that's a thing, but let's say you did, and then you saw if students who wore blue hats tend to get better grades. And lo and behold, surprise and surprise, you saw no, there was no correlation between wearing blue hats and getting good grades. So there, was that a total waste of time? Do you not bother submitting these reports to publication? Actually, go ahead and try, because a lack of correlation has meaning. It shows, it adds to the literature that somebody went out there and tested this theory and there was no correlation. So now everybody else, all the experts whose job it is to read everything, will read that article and see, oh, okay, so there's no correlation between blue hats and grades. It's not worth pursuing any further. Or, I shouldn't say that. It drops in the priority of things to do. There are other things that are now have higher priority to pursue, and if somebody else, somewhere else in the education sciences, ever thought of blue hats and grades, they now know, well, okay, so much for that theory. Maybe I'll revisit it in the future, but right now I have this other thing that's competing for my attention. I'll spend more time on that. So a negative correlation is valuable too. Positive correlation, by the way, is just equally valuable. It adds to the literature so that experts who read everything can know that such a link exists. So I said the word positive and I said the word negative. In science, in medicine, for the record, I need to clarify, positive does not mean good, negative does not mean bad. A positive result means whatever it is you're looking for is there. A negative result means whatever you're looking for is not there. That's what it means. For example, a pregnancy test. Do you want to be pregnant or not? Is that good or bad? Your pregnancy test comes up positive. Is that good or bad? Well, that really depends, right? If you wanted to be pregnant, then positive is good. If you don't want to be pregnant, then pregnancy is bad. So positive, negative does not mean good or bad. It just means that the hormone that is in the woman's urine when she is pregnant is tested. And if it's there in the urine, it's positive. If it's not there, it's negative. Just like in all medicine, nothing is 100%, nothing is 0%. No test in medicine is 100% accurate. There's always a possible chance of error. A false positive test says, the test says it's there, but it's actually not there. So you could have a false positive pregnancy test. You could have a false negative pregnancy test. It could say it's not there, but it actually is. Enough with pregnancy. Let's talk about a generic disease, a hypothetical disease X. For most diseases, the vast majority of the population does not have the disease. So they take this test, which is not 100% perfect, because nothing in reality is, and most of them will come up negative, and they don't have the disease, so that's true negative. Some of them, a small percentage, will come up positive even though they don't have the disease, but they now think they do. Meanwhile, people with the disease, most of them, it will come up positive, and that's true positive because they do have the disease. And some of them, a small percentage, will come up negative, and that's false negative because they don't have the disease. They do have the disease, but the test says they don't have the disease. So what? Why does that matter? Here's an example. And unfortunately, math is a thing. You want to go into health sciences, you need to get good at math. If you are bad at math, seriously consider, and you are supposed to be a college student, seriously consider taking a remedial math course, because the upper level classes really don't have time to catch you up to the math skills you're supposed to have had coming out of high school. Word to the wise. I really cannot stress this more. Math is very, very important, at least high school math. Why is this down so low? Okay, so let's take this graph and represent it with some hypothetical numbers. So for a disease, and you're looking at a population of 1 million people, which is not hard to think of. You know, Manhattan has 10 million, plus or minus, depending on rush hour. Anyway, let's say 1%, keep it simple. Let's say 1% of 1 million people have a disease. So 1% of 1 million, let's move the decimal point 1, 2. So we're left with 10,000 people. 99% don't have the disease, so 1 million minus 10,000 is 990,000. Okay? You can follow along with your calculator if you don't believe me. There's a test for a disease that's 95% accurate. 95%? If you got a 95 at Queensborough Community College, most professors will give you an A. So you show your A grade to your parents, and your parents will say, congratulations, you must be an expert on this topic. You must know everything. No, you don't know everything. There's 5% that you still don't know. That's why you didn't get 100. And that's the problem. You look at a number as high as 95 and you think, oh, then it's perfect. And that's the error you're making. It's not perfect. There's a 5% inaccuracy. So, what does that mean? Well, you know that 990,000 people do not have the disease. They take the test. 5% of them are false positive. 5% are false positive. 5% of 990,000 is 50,000, almost 50,000. Let's bring up my calculator. 990,000 times 0.05, almost 50,000. 50,000 people are told they have the disease when they actually do not. Like, well, now from this point of view, all the way up here in the cloud, you think 50,000 out of 1,000,000, that's not so bad, is it? So from a statistician's point of view, it's not so bad. But now, what if you were one of those 50,000 people? And what if it was breast cancer or prostate cancer? So you take a quick test and it comes up positive, and now you think, oh my God, I have cancer. So what does the doctor do? They have to get a biopsy. But if you at your primary care provider, they probably don't have the tools to take a biopsy. You have to go to the oncologist. So you have to make an appointment, and it's going to be a few days away. So you spend those few days thinking you have cancer. You had your life planned ahead of you, and now suddenly you feel like dead man walking. You feel like a ticking time bomb. So you finally go to the oncologist, and they get out the giant thick biopsy needle, whether it's breast cancer or prostate cancer. They take a sample, and I've heard it's really painful. Even with modern anesthesia, it still stings. And it's such a sensitive place too. You know, for you men, prostate biopsy is no joke. Look up prostate cancer biopsy if you feel brave enough. Well, then what happens? It has to go to the pathologist, so it's going to take another few days while you wait by the phone for the results. And then finally, the results come in, they give you a phone call, or they may even make you come in to the oncologist to read the results, and they tell you, I'm sorry, that initial test was a false positive. You actually don't have cancer. So these people spend all those days thinking they have cancer. Now they're told, sorry, it's a mistake. It was a false positive. That can really devastate psychology, mental well-being. So to this day, routine breast cancer mammography and prostate cancer screening is not given automatically to anybody over 50 years old. It is only given to those who show, through a conversation with their primary care provider, a risk factor for breast cancer or prostate cancer. Risk factors in like personal behaviors, smoking is a risk factor. Family history is a big one. If their family, their parents or their grandparents had either cancers, then, or any other medical evidence-based reason, then they can get a mammography or a prostate cancer screening. For everybody else, it's not recommended, because if you give a breast cancer mammography to every woman over 50, you may catch these ladies in red, but you'll catch these ladies in pink, and the number of ladies who are false positive will be vastly much more than the number of ladies who are true positive. And that they decided that the mental anguish and suffering to the system does not justify it is not outweighed by the benefits of catching one person with it. And remember, anybody who does have a family history, genetic risk, or behavioral risk, like smoking, they are going to get a mammogram anyway. So this number shrinks a bit actually, and so why make this section of the population go through all of that suffering and pain for not that much of a benefit? Because remember, anybody with risk factors are going to get a mammogram anyway. It's just that routine mammograms are no longer recommended. This is where false positives and negatives really play a part. Where was that test that they took that's such a high inaccurate rate? 5%. Oh, now it's 1 in 20. That doesn't sound so tiny anymore, right? It was probably a screening test. And the difference between a screening test and a diagnostic test is exactly that. Screening tests are designed to minimize false negatives, but in order to do that, you have to allow for high false positives, the high sensitivity, and the design is so that it'll catch anybody who has even a small chance of having the disease. It'll catch everybody here. It'll include these folks and these folks. That is a screening test. And the purpose of a screening test is that you can give it to everybody because it's cheaper, easier, quicker, simpler, less painful. It can be done by minimally trained staff or no untrained staff, and so it's easy and cheap to be given to the most number of people. So let's leave cancer for a while. What's another one where there's a greater example? COVID test. The home COVID test, where you take a cotton swab and you scrape the inside of your nostrils, you put it in a tube, and then you try that testing fluid on it, and you wait 15 minutes. That is a screening test. It can be cheap. I know $40 for a COVID test doesn't sound cheap, but it's cheaper than the alternative, I'll tell you that. As medical tests go, it's a reasonable price. It can be done by anybody. It can be done by yourself. There's no pain in it. It's gonna make you sneeze a bit, but that's about it. So it's a screening test. However, it has high false positives, but that's okay. What if you come up positive on the home COVID test, it doesn't prove you have COVID. What you're supposed to do is call your doctor immediately, and your doctor will have you come in, and they will take a blood sample, and that is a diagnostic test. Because diagnostic tests are expensive, they're painful, there's a blood needle involved, there has to be a specialist, a phlebotomist, nurse or doctor has to draw your blood, send it to the lab does it, it's also expensive again. But the blood test for COVID is way more accurate, and the chance of a true positive is very high, the chance of a false negative is very low. You pay for that expense by having a better test. Well, why don't you give everybody a blood test? Well, that's just prohibitive. Why blood test people who probably just have the ordinary cold, or during the pandemic they tested everybody whether they had symptoms or not. It was better to give them the screening test, the nasal swab, than to force everybody to come in every day for a blood test. So that's the difference between a screening test and a diagnostic test. If you took something that was easy, cheap, less painful, then it was a screening test. For those of you who have made it this far, congratulations. We got over the hard part, the hard science about data and evidence and research. From now on, the remaining slides is more about the subjective personality stuff. And so we're in the home stretch, folks. Opinions. Okay, for many of you, you're taking this class because you're going to end up becoming a healthcare professional. And for many of you, once you finish and get your certification, You will be the medical professional in your family. You will be the highest trained medical professional among you, your immediate family, and maybe even your relatives. For them, you will be their doctor. Doesn't matter if you become an EMT or a medical assistant or a physical therapist, a phlebotomist, an emergency room technician, your family won't care. They will introduce you at every social event as our family doctor. You'll try to explain, Ma, no, I'm not a doctor. Please, can you stop? And they don't care. She's going to smile and say, I'm so proud of you. And then 5 seconds later, turn around and say, meet my child, our doctor. That's just a fact of life. Deal with it. Get used to it. But that means that when you give an opinion about health, they will take it as seriously, your family will take it as seriously as if they heard it from their doctor. They'll take it more seriously because you are family. You are inside that protective shield they use to keep out strangers. So your words will have so much more power inside your home than anybody else's, that people who are legitimately credentialed, authorized experts. What I'm trying to get at is you have so much power, and as a famous person once said, a very wise man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. It is your responsibility either to get it right or to control your words. It is your responsibility, once you are given any about authority to not give bad advice. First, do no harm. And if you're thinking, I can't promise that. I don't know as much as our infectious disease specialist. I don't know as much as the medical director of the New York State Department of Health. What the hell am I supposed to, what do you expect from me? And I'm saying, I'm expecting you to control your words. When I'm on the internet, or when I'm shooting the breeze with my friends or colleagues, I give lots of legal advice. But everybody knows to ignore it. So I can shoot my mouth off and say, yeah, I think he was guilty. And everybody knows it doesn't mean anything because I don't know anything about law. But if somebody asks me about a question about health, now I shut my mouth and I think very carefully about what I'm about to say next, because I know that my words have power when it comes to health care, and I am very, very careful. I wield my power with responsibility, so should you. So when can you start calling yourself an expert? Depends on the definition of an expert, right? Sometimes the expert is defined as the person who knows the most in the room. So if you literally are the most knowledgeable person in the room, and there are way more knowledgeable people elsewhere in the world, they're just not here at the time, then you happen to be the local expert, right? But seriously, if you nowadays with internet available to everybody, you need to be careful. What about a doctor? Is a doctor a medical expert? Let me see, I'm now being careful with my words. When you show up in the emergency room, you will meet lots of people in white outer garments. Some of them are emergency room attendings, and they are the expert in the room. But some people in white coats may be first-year medical residents, and they're not trusted with anything. The first year of medical residency in the emergency room, these first-year residents are not allowed to be left alone in case they kill somebody. They know a lot of information, but that means they know enough to cause real harm. So what they do is what the organization does is assign these first year residents to always be supervised by somebody else, a seasoned, experienced member of the emergency room team, so they don't do anything crazy. The most dangerous person in the room, in the emergency room, actually is the second year resident, because by the second year, they're still not completely ready to work on their own. But however, all the ER staff by that time knows this person and tends to leave them alone and tends to let them work unsupervised. So the second year residents still don't know enough to be working unsupervised, yet they are left unsupervised. So they're actually the most dangerous person in the room. 4 years of emergency room residency finally makes them a true expert, and now they can be hired as the emergency room attending. So no, 4 years of medical school is not enough. It's not enough. And yet there are people on the internet who barely made it out of high school. They read a few articles and now they're trying to tell people what to do, or even going so far as to tell their fans to ignore their doctor's opinion, recommendations. Who can you trust then? Because there are a lot of internet people who seem very charismatic. They seem very intelligent. They certainly look the way you like, and they certainly talk the way you like, and they vote the same way you do. They sing very well. So why can't you trust them? Well, one thing you can do is follow the money. Who's signing their paychecks? An employer is paid by the company, but everybody knows that, right? Who pays for a social media influencer? Well, the clicks, the advertising revenue, and that's why they're in it. They say they're in it to make the world a better place. They say they're in it to bring out the truth. What they're really in it for is to sell advertising space so they can get paid by the advertiser. Some of them have a political agenda, so they don't get benefited directly by their fans with their subs and likes, but they can convince their fans to vote a certain way so that their political agenda gets advanced in democracy. So that's what you look for, any possible conflicts of interest. What about if your friend sends you an article? Do they have any conflicts of interest? Do they get money from sharing an article with you as a friend? Probably not, but what do they gain out of it instead of money? How about social standing? How about reinforcing social bonds? So they are a friend, but they want to continue being your friend, so they want to share funny stuff and entertaining stuff. And oh my God, look at this article I just found. Isn't this horrible? And by sharing this experience, you improve your social bond. So that's what they get out of it. Follow the possible conflict of interest. Observational studies often get misinterpreted by news articles and social media influencers, because these news articles and social media influencers, what they're really trying to do is sell clicks and subs and likes so that they can get paid advertising revenue. So they need to get as many people to click on their articles, and they need to create clickbait. They need to create titles that capture people's eyeballs and make people click on the article and share it and make it go viral, which means that if they get a chance to reword a phrase to make it more emotional, they will. What I'm saying is viral news articles have a powerful temptation to bend the truth so that it becomes more interesting, until at some point it does not resemble the real truth at all. There have been many times where I clicked on an article that's been going around and I read it, and then they reference the original scientific article. It's a news article that's referencing a scientific report. So I follow the trail and read the scientific report. And it turns out that it's the opposite. The conclusion of the news article is the opposite of what the original scientific report was coming to. The fudging, the manipulation has gotten that bad just to be clickbait. And that's the problem with our society today. That's one of the problems with society today. That imagine the internet space as not some kind of technologic miracle, but just another ecosystem. An ecosystem where little critters get eaten by bigger critters, and then they poop, and the poop is eaten by little critters, and the cycle continues. And there's just the water cycle, and the plants absorb sunlight and get eaten by other critters. That kind of an ecosystem. But this time in the internet, it's an ecosystem of ideas. The ideas are spread by people who modified it to make it go viral, and articles or ideas that stick closer to the truth don't spread because they're not modified, so they're not as interesting. So people who are appealing to your emotions get more clicks, and the people who are charismatic and likable find ways to get more clicks, and the people who stick strictly to the truth don't get as many clicks, and they don't go as viral. This gentleman had a nice take on the psychological basis behind a psychological explanation behind why conspiracy theories are so popular. So I invite you to check it out. But anyway, I'm done here. It's been a long lecture. I think I've been talking for over 2 hours. You know what? I first want to apologize that I used up so much of your time. But then I want to say, didn't I not make the textbook required? So you save so many hours and so much money not buying the textbook. Here I am taking some of that time back, teaching you things that I think you really need to know. So thank you for your patience and sitting through this with me. Hopefully there are some things you learn from this that you'll take away with you even after this class and semester is over, and it'll help you protect yourself from being manipulated by the con artists out in the internet today. So good luck, and I'll see you next time.